So before I start my talk, I actually have some disclaimers. So because I'm going to talk about the product that we use, and I know every labs use different things, and so I'm not particularly endorsing anything. I just want, and I know we all have different preferences. I'm just going to talk about what I use in my lab and why do I use certain things in my lab. And also because when we did the survey last year, people want us to go back to the basic a little bit, except talking about advancing technique and new instrument. We also want to just discuss a little bit about basic technique. Okay, so I thought, okay, since I lost one of our speakers, I couldn't find any other speaker. So I thought, okay, I'll put myself in. Let's just talk about resins. So Tom and I also prepared some poll questions we like to ask people, and just to see how different labs use resin differently. Okay, so what is a good EM resin? I mean, we use it every day, and so we want them not to shrink very much and to preserve the 3D dimension. We want it to have excellent moisture resistance and chemical resistance and good electrical properties too, and also increase mechanical fatigue strength and impact resistant. And we want it to have low volatile organic compound and long shelf life. So there's many resins that we can choose that in the market, okay? And so one of them stands out, that's EPON, that we all use it. It's been used since like 1960s or probably even before that, and we are still using it, okay? So I looked at the EPON resin, and so the EPON resin, we all use different kits. They all have different brand name. We sometimes call Embed A12 and Eponate, Polybed, XL, LX 112, and they are all basically EPON. Okay, and they have four basic major components: EPON and two anhydride component, that DDSA and NMA, and the accelerator that we normally add at the last before we want to polymerize it. So as I said, EPON used since 1961. We are still basically following what Luft published, that he has recommended the best ratio is 0.7. That means the anhydride component and the EPON component ratio at 0.7. That gives the optimum cutting properties. Okay, and with all this research throughout the year, we also know that we can adjust the hardness of EPON by adjusting the anhydride, the ratio. So NMA is the one you want to increase the ratio, and then you will produce harder blocks. So that allows us to match the hardness that we want. Okay, so you see polls, just please answer it, okay? And so then Tom's running the polls, and I will keep going. Can I keep going, Tom, when you are running polls? I think so. No, I can't. All right, so I'll keep talking. So when we are doing the polls, please answer it and so we can close it. Okay. So as I said, we can adjust the hardness by adding more NMM component. So what I did is I asked 7 different EM lab to give me their EPON recipe, and then just to see what we are using, what brand we are using, and what's the composition we use, and how we follow up how does the lab use EPON for their research. Tom, we have to close it. I think I cannot advance. Tom,
can I close? Okay. Yeah, closed it.
I'll close this. Okay, so can everybody see the result?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. So, okay, now I can advance. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so I asked 7 different EM labs and give me just to find out how do we make resins. So, and I want to thank these 7 labs that are sharing the recipe with me. So I named them from A to G. Okay, so I found out 3 labs measure resins component by weight, and 4 labs actually measure by volume. Okay, and only 2 labs actually specify the WPE, which is weight per epoxy equivalent, in their recipe. And 5 labs have separate hard and medium hard resin recipe, and then 2 labs actually did not specify what is the hardness of their EPOM recipe. Okay, so the below is the table that I kind of normalize these 4 labs, and you can see they are slightly different. Okay, and so 3 of the recipe are both called hard recipe. I think they use this recipe for their volume EM sample preparation, and so we don't actually get to compare those resin blocks, but this is the recipe that I get. But one of the problem here is none of these listed the WPE of the EPOM. Okay, so what is I'll go through why. I don't know how many people know about WPE and why it is important. Okay, so let's just go through the other 3 labs. Let's see. The other 3 labs actually use the EPOM recipe. They prepare their EPOM by weight. Okay, and again I normalized it roughly, and these 3 recipe, 2 of these lab actually has both hard and medium recipe composition they sent me, but I'm just using the medium because they come out pretty similar between the 2 labs that actually using WPE to calculate their resin composition. Okay, so if you don't know what WPE is, and that is something that you normally see labeled on the bottle. Okay, all right. So on every bottle of EPOM, you will see the listed somewhere here. I don't know if you can read it. Okay, so normally that number can range from 140 to 180. Okay, if you have a big batch of resin you published, or you purchased, or you bought from the same vendors, and they may stay the same. But I have been changing jobs, and so I go to different labs, and I see EPOM has quite different WP because they were purchased from different batch at spreading a different range of time. So I ended up having to recalculate all these recipes that was I normally use because the WP is very different than what we have. So WP is the weight equivalent for EPOM when we get epoxy equivalent by weight. Okay, so you can see when it's different when you take the same amount of EPOM from the bottle, you actually have different composition of epoxy in those components when you try to mix them. Okay, as I said, we follow the recipe that Luft have recommended, that the best composition, the ratio is 0.7 with anhydride and EPOM. So this ratio can give you the best optimum cutting properties. I listed the reference here. Okay. So how do you calculate WPE? And so WPE basically is you calculate the weight of the anhydride that needed for a fixed amount. Here is 100 grams of EPOM, and then you calculate the WPE here. Okay, so you can, and then you want the ratio of anhydride and the EPOM stays at 0.7. Okay, so the proper way of making it, you make a mixture A containing EPOM and DDSA, and then a mixture B containing EPOM mixed with NMA. And then we know NMA will give you harder resins. Okay, then you can combine this A and B mix. Both of them have a and E ratio at 0.7. So you can mix them, and then to decide what is the best composition that you what the hardness that you want for your resin. So I actually extracted this table from lab research, and I listed the URL there because I think they have the best explanation of how to calculate WPE. Okay, so here they give you a table that shows you mixture A and B with different amount, and then give you soft resin or hard resin or medium resin. So most of the time I stay with medium or hard. Okay, so and you can follow this recipe and actually calculate it back. And so my lab actually calculate back into a single mix recipe for EPON. So one of my staff, who's talented with codes, he actually wrote the program. We can just plug in the WPE and then put it in the weight of the final weight we want. Then it will calculate what's the composition that we need if we want the medium resin or we want the hard resin. Okay, so and you also see the 7 labs also use different accelerators. So you can use BDMA or DMP30, or they can both be used, although you use different amount. When you use BDMA, you need a little bit more than DMP30. So DMP30 normally you use 1.5 to 2%, and BDMA you use 2.5 to 3% of the total volume. Okay, so if you have seen EMS's website, they actually recommend people switch to use BDMA because it's less viscous and penetrate faster, and it's also more stable than DMP30. So if I know Tatella sells EPON resin, and you can order with BDMA accelerator, or you can use DMP30. Okay, and my lab have just been using DMP30. We have not really switched. I don't really have any comparison, but I do know if you have slight variation of accelerator, and often that will affect the quality of your block. You can see the color change, and also the block sometimes can get very brittle because if you put more accelerator, yes, it will polymerize faster, but those blocks also tend to be difficult to section. They tend to be brittle. Okay, so I think I have. So why do you sometimes want to have different hardness of resin? Okay, so we know that volume EM they recommend to use them. You know, both Katie and Paulos talk about you need to really have hard resin because they have to sustain the fib ion milling, and also they have to be volume EM. They also need to section them really thin. So when you have section, you want to cut them thinner, you want to have harder blocks. And sometimes you also want to match with your tissue density. If you have a very dense tissue or hard tissue, you want to use a harder block. Okay, that just makes the section a bit easier, and because you have the same consistency when you cut them through the tissue and the resin. Okay, so this is sometimes when I will judge to use different hardness, and most of the time we use medium the hardness for most of the work. So there are also other alternatives of EPON that you can choose. So I like two of the low viscosity epoxy resin. One is the Spurs resin, one is the Keto like 651. I think I pronounced it right, or Quato 651. Okay, I actually just started using Keto a little bit more, and I really liked it. Okay, so Spurs, we have been using it for a long time. One of the advantages of Spurs is it's compatible with ethanol. And so sometimes if I have something that with high lipid content, I don't want them to go through a lot of organic solvent, I can stop after dried ethanol and I can go to resin directly. Okay, but some people do not like Spurs because they feel the contrast is not as good as EPON, and they are sensitive to moisture. Okay, but when I like to use them when I'm embedding cells or tissues on solid matrix like cover slips or membrane, and when the exchange often has a lot more carryover, I like to use a low viscosity resin. So we are experimenting with keto, and we had some very good success with using keto for retina embedding these days because it's a low viscosity resin. And the other EPON resin, we quite like this iodide EPON. So it's a mixture of iodide and EPON, and has very good sectioning properties and give you good contrast. And it's also, but it's very viscous. But my staff really like it, so we use it quite routinely instead of using EPON. Okay, and Jercupon you heard a lot because it was one of the resins started to be recommended when people start to using FIPSEM and also volume EM because it has a hard recipe, and also in the literature it's suggested Jercupon has lower shrinkage, so they can prevent drastic volume change after embedding. But right now, actually, we still find Jercupon still shrinks. And so you probably see quite a lot of presentation. They talk about they just use a hard recipe of EPON to do the embedding for the volume, yeah, and that works very well too. Okay, so the other big portion of the resin we use routinely in the lab is acrylic resin. So we know acrylic resin is almost the resin you go for anything with immuno, and because it's hydrophilic, it's compatible with antibody labeling, and the traditionally we use LR white, and now people use low acryl because it can polymerize at low temperature, and at lower temperature you can preserve the fluorescence much better. Okay, so I listed the Uniquil here, which is one of the acrylic resin I used a lot, and for many years for immuno labeling, but probably 5 years ago, EMS discontinued it because they said it has a carcinogen. I thought, well, I used it for how many years? Now I know it causes cancer. But anyway, so I liked Uniquil when I was using it because it's very beam stable, and it also preserved the antigen very well. Okay, so again, I started to ask people, how do you mix resins? I know different labs probably have different way, just as some labs use volume, some labs use weighing. So I personally like weighing the resin because it's just less. I know it's probably more cumbersome, but I just feel like it's more accurate, and than using the pipetting. Okay, and maybe some people here have some tricks. Please do speak out and let people know how you mix resin. Okay, my method is certainly not a gold standard by far. Okay, and so you probably also do what do vacuuming to remove the air bubble trapped in the resin when you mix them. So we normally use a rotator to rotate the resin. I don't use sterile bar or using any mixers. I just let them gentle rotate. And then sometimes when we use spurs, because one of the spurs component is volatile, so you cannot put it in vacuum. So then I use centrifugation to bring out the air bubbles up. And some people will wound up the resin before you mix them. You can put them in 60 or 50 degree oven, and it will be less viscous, so easier to dispense. Okay, and so as I just previously mentioned, the hardness should really match with the embedded tissue. That's why when you embed plant or some harder material tissue, you probably want to consider using a harder formulation of your resin. Okay, and often contamination coming from environment. We recently processed a sample in the lab, and it has all kinds of dust particle fibers because they use ultracentrifugation to pellet the sample. It ended up pellet down a lot of environmental contaminant, and that is also a problem when we sectioning. So all the material used to prepare the resin really should be clean. That is also why I like to use those specimen cups or centrifuge tube, because I like to always cap it so they are not open when we are mixing it. And my lab save all the leftover resins, and so we routinely freeze them in -20 before we use it. So we do have some polls to ask Tom, you want to run some polls now? I don't know how many we run since I was talking. Tom, can you hear me? Okay, we'll run the polls when Tom has time to run it.
Okay, running one now. You see it?
The hardness one, that's already run, right? Should I stop sharing?
I just started measure resin.
Resin hardness. Fail to share poll. Another poll has started or share. Okay, all right. Okay.
You see that?
I see that, but I missed all the results. So most of people do the resin by weight from what I can see right now. Okay, so we have 68% people already answered, 70%. Good. So good to know that majority people using weight too, just like what I normally do. Okay, the number is not increasing. I'm just going to end it so people can see the result. Okay. All right. So please stop me anytime if you have any comment. As I said, this is just the method that we follow in my lab, and but I know many different lab has different tricks and different preference for some different reason. I would be happy that if you can share with us. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. How many polls do we have left?
6 more.
You want to run more? I should keep going.
Sure.
I think I've already done these slides. Oops. Okay. So okay, so I'm sharing the measure resin. Okay, do people see the share result? I don't know. Sorry, let me look at it.
Yeah, I think you're the host, Ru-ching, so I'm not seeing what you're seeing.
Oh, really? Okay, should I change you to be the host? Do you see the poll result?
I do not.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I do too.
I see it. We do. Oh, it went away.
Oh, really?
Here we go.
Let me see. Let me see. I can go back to share more results. Sorry, we are a little bit slow on this. So we have one resin hardness. And do you change resin hardness to different tissues? Share results. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slides. You guys are seeing the result, the poll results, right? And so infiltration schedule. Again, this is a really traditional protocol that we do 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-4, and then go to pure resin. And again, this is a schedule that can be changed really depending on the type of tissue or cells you are using, or if you use any other measure to enhance the infiltration. Okay, so for monolayer cells, we definitely shorten a lot of these infiltration steps. And for dense tissue, yes, you require probably 2 or 3 overnights in pure resin if you don't use any other enhancement measure, which I will talk about that what we can apply into to enhance the infiltration speed. And so what we normally do in my lab is we normally transfer specimen to a new tube, and then the second change with pure resin before overnight. And then the next day we change it again before we put it in embedding. But again, this protocol we change all the time. Let me stop sharing on this poll and share result. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so there are a few things that you can do to really speed up things when you are in a rush to get your results. So first, mixing, vigorous shaking can really increase the rate of exchange, okay? And centrifugation can also enhance the fluid diffusion, okay? And sometimes you spin just 30 seconds at 6,000 RPM in a mini centrifuge can help with the infiltration of the resin, especially when the resin is very viscous. Okay, frequent change of ring solutions. And the other thing that you can really apply is a microwave assisted infiltration. That can shorten the infiltration steps pretty drastically. Okay, but if you don't have a biowave, like you could actually find the cold point, cold spot in a regular lab microwave, and then we normally use a big water reservoir to prevent the heating. So then you can identify that cold spot. You can still do microwave, controlled microwave. You will have the microwave, the energy stimulation, but not to increase the temperature when you do the infiltration. This is sometimes we had done in the past. Okay, stop sharing. Resin hardness. Tom, you do not. Which poll result are you guys looking, or there's no poll result that's sharing now? Hold on.
No, there's no problem.
I don't
Yeah,
see any.
resin hardness says it ended and measure resin is launched. But I don't have any responses on what I'm seeing. I'm sorry.
Hold on. I'm going to make you into a host, Tom.
Do you want me to end measure resin?
I
Yeah.
haven't seen measure resin.
Okay.
How do I make you to be host? I muted you. Sorry. Okay. Tom, can you make yourself host? No?
Let's see here.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'm going to
host
talk
now.
about.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So can you launch the poll now?
Let's take a look.
Sorry for all these technical glitches. Okay, we are a little bit challenged here today.
Okay, I just launched fresh resin.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, so we talk about solvent. This is also has a lot of variation between different labs. Okay, so some labs are still using propylene oxide as the final transition fluid before you go to resin. Okay, so I don't really like to use propylene oxide, and also we are trying to move toward automated sample processing, and propylene oxide is not compatible with the robotic platform because it evaporates too fast. You cannot put it in the reservoir. So we are actually gradually, we are sticking with just stop at acetone and using ethanol all the way to 100% ethanol, and then we do a quick transition from ethanol to acetone. And then from that, we go to the resin. Of course, I know different labs still use, many labs still use propylene oxide. And the reason we try to stay away with propylene oxide is we are converting our protocol to automated sample processing. So it's not really compatible. So one of the solvent I have not tried, but I know some people are using is acetonitrile nitrile. I would love to hear somebody give me the reason or justification they prefer acetonitrile nitrile than acetone or ethanol. I've never really used it. Maybe Al will also talk about it later during his talk. Okay, so okay, I think this one is going to be big. Okay, curing resin. That's again different lab may have different. I've asked a few labs. They also have different temperature, but most of people use about 60 degree, between 60 and 65. Some labs said they use 70, and most of us going for overnight 18 to 24-hour curing. Okay, and sometimes you know we have done if you have read the quick freeze substitution protocol from McDonald's, they use 95 to 100 degree to bake, and you can finish the block within 1 or 2 hours. Okay, so so we only have 21 people participated in the fresh resin. Okay, and so sometimes if you really have very difficult samples like spores or something that really difficult to infiltrate, and some people will try to heat it overnight at 45 degree, 40 or 45, and just overnight before you go take it to 60. So during that, the lower temperature baking, they still have the chance to infiltrate, to really push the resin infiltration. So I don't know which protocol you use, but these are all the variations I know that people can do. So let's go through quickly. Go to acrylic resin. Maybe I should stop. We've gone way over time now. So let me see how many slides we have. Okay. I'm just going to stop here, and so we have time for Al to give his talk.